Week 3 of the college football season has arrived. We are already at the middle of September, and I'm not going to do too much talking about recapping week 2. I did my week 2 college football takeaways on a YouTube short this past Saturday night after all the games were finished. And I also did takeaways from week 1 if you'd like to check those out. It's under the shorts category, which I'll be doing those every week after all the games are finished. But the two big storylines from week 2: Texas, a dominant win on the road against Michigan. And the big story of the week: Northern Illinois, a 28.5-point underdog, went on the road against Notre Dame and pulled off the upset 16-14. And I'm bringing this up, you're going to think, what does this team have to do with Notre Dame? But Florida State, up until this past Saturday, was the talk of college football. They were the laughingstock of college football. Florida State being 0-2 is what everybody was talking about. And there's a reason why I said in the week 1 predictions video that Florida State needed a big upset to happen before their game on Labor Day night to get the attention off of them, because a big reason why they've been struggling right now has been because the media is just talking about them too much. And now all the attention is on Notre Dame. So Florida State, they have all the confidence in the world coming off of a bye week, and now all the attention has shifted from them to Notre Dame. I wanted to bring that up because I'm sure that other people are going to mention as well, and I just wanted to say it first. But anyways, on to the week 3 college football predictions. And it may just feel like we're scraping at the bottom of the barrel looking for the 7 best matchups of the week. And I did the best that I could. But at least we do have a couple of ranked matchups this week. But one of them is on Friday night, which I will be starting off with Arizona and Kansas State. Then Oregon and Oregon State. Alabama, Wisconsin, West Virginia, Pittsburgh, Texas A&M, Florida, Boston College, and Missouri. And closing things out with the college game day game of the week, LSU and South Carolina. Without further ado, let's get to the week 3 college football predictions. Game number 1 on the docket this week: Arizona and Kansas State on Friday night. And I mainly want to highlight the offenses, as I do anticipate this game is going to be very high scoring. Despite what we saw from these two teams last week, as both of these teams were among several ranked teams who did struggle this past Saturday, as Arizona, they won 22-10 over Northern Arizona, and Kansas State with a decisive 34-27 win over Tulane on the road. For the Arizona Wildcats, wide receiver Tetero McMillan, a bounce-back game is needed from him if Arizona is going to pull off the upset in this game, as he had over 300 receiving yards in the season opener against New Mexico. But last week against Northern Arizona, he was very quiet, as I believe, if I remember correctly, he only had 2 catches for maybe 16 yards. Arizona quarterback Noah Fafita, I am a big fan of his. I think he is one of, if not the most underrated quarterback in the entire country. I liked what I saw from him last year, and so far he is completing about 65% of his passes, 595 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. For the Kansas State Wildcats, quarterback Avery Johnson, 334 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 1 interception on the season so far. But what is going to be the X factor in this game for me is which team is going to stop the run better in this matchup. As for Arizona, Quali Conley is averaging 7.5 yards per carry. New Mexico transfer Ja'Cory Croskett Merritt is averaging 8.2 yards per carry. And for Kansas State, running back DJ Giddens, 124 yards against Tennessee Martin in the season opener, 114 yards last week against Tulane. Kansas State is 39th in run defense, and Arizona is 82nd in run defense. And as much as I do anticipate this game is going to be very high scoring, as this game is a really tough call for me, but I'm going to pick Kansas State to win this game, but I do think that Arizona is going to cover whatever the point spread is. I believe at this moment it's 7, but it could go up to 7.5. But I do think for those who like to place bets on spreads and things like that, I do think there is value with the points in Arizona. I do think Kansas State, they do win this game in a very high scoring game. Next up, Oregon and Oregon State in the rivalry known as the Civil War. And I'm glad that with conference realignment, we still do have some of the rivalries still being a part of this new college football era. Oregon has really had a tough time in games this season. As Oregon, they have really underachieved so far. And I'm mainly talking about against Idaho in week 1. Week 2, I can understand that because I do think that Boise State, they are a much better team than what people realize. And I do think Boise State, when it's all said and done, maybe they could be that group of 5 representative in this 12-team playoff. As Oregon did allow 192 rushing yards to Ashton Genty last week. Quarterback Dylan Gabriel, he's completing 84.3% of his passes. 4 touchdown passes and no interceptions. Evan Stewart did get going last week. That was a big key for me for Oregon to win that game, was getting Evan Stewart going, the transfer from Texas A&M. Is going into the season, I felt like Oregon, at the very least, they were top 3 as far as receiving cores in the entire country. For Oregon State to pull out this upset, as at the moment I do think Oregon is favored by 16 points maybe, or it's somewhere in the ballpark of 2 touchdowns. Asserting running back Jam Griffin early, considering how well Boise State did against the Oregon run defense a week ago. And with this being a rivalry game, you can throw stats and records and what happened the year before. You can just toss it to the side. Could this be the game where Oregon gets going? As high expectations were on Oregon going into the season, many felt like they were third in line as far as winning the national championship behind Georgia and Ohio State. I do think Oregon wins this game, but I would not be surprised if for the 3rd week in a row, it was a game where they really struggled, considering that this is their first road game of the year. I would not be surprised if Oregon State at least covered the points, but I do think that this is the week that, with this being a rivalry game, I just feel like this is the game where Oregon finally gets going. They win convincingly, and they start to meet those expectations that a lot of people had on them going into the year. Alabama and Wisconsin. Alabama going on the road to Camp Randall for the third game in the Kalen DeBoer era, and both teams will be without a key defensive player in the first half of this game. Wisconsin will be without Jake Chaney, and Alabama will be without Justin Jefferson. And yes, Alabama does have a player on their team named Justin Jefferson, as they both committed targeting penalties in the second half of their respective games last week. Last week, Alabama won against South Florida by a score of 42-16. However, South Florida was in the game for a lot longer than what the final score entails. South Florida, they had opportunities to pull off a major upset. In my opinion, if South Florida would have upset Alabama this past Saturday, it would have been, at least in my opinion, a bigger upset than Northern Illinois upsetting Notre Dame. But as the game went along, particularly in the fourth quarter, Alabama, they just got better as that game went along. While Wisconsin, they have looked sluggish in their first two games of the year. In week one, a 28-14 win over Western Michigan. And last week, a 27-13 win over South Dakota, which, for the record, South Dakota is in the FCS. I felt like coming into the season that this particular game, there could have been potential for this to be a game where College Game Day goes on their season tour. But based off of what I've seen in these first two games, I just don't think this game is going to be as competitive as I thought it would before. Like, I'll be surprised if Wisconsin keeps this game to within 3 scores. What can Wisconsin do to pull off the upset? Well, they just have to find some sort of equalizer. But as much as you can pull off upsets by running the football and keeping the opposing offense on the sidelines, keep them cold, I just don't think Wisconsin can do that. I just don't think that this Wisconsin team is the way that it was a decade ago, where they were known for running the football, and now Wisconsin, they're becoming more of a passing team than we've ever seen them before, with Luke Fickell at the helm. I think Alabama wins this game very convincingly, despite this being a road game, and it's the first road game of the Kalen DeBoer era. I think Alabama, they should win at the bare minimum by 3 scores. I'll be surprised if Wisconsin keeps this close. Nothing against Wisconsin, their fan base. I just think that Wisconsin has just looked too sluggish in their first 2 games of the year to have a chance in this one. West Virginia and Pittsburgh in the rivalry known as the Backyard Brawl. West Virginia won this game last season 17-6. A very low-scoring game last season. And I had a difficult time on deciding who I was going to pick in this game. 1 minute I was on the West Virginia side, as West Virginia, at least, they showed some signs defensively against Penn State in their season opener. But their offense, they couldn't generate much in that game, and the game just started to get away from them. And then I also took into account that I do feel like Pittsburgh, they're coming off of a very emotional win over Cincinnati, where they rallied from 27-6 down to win 28-27 off a game-winning field goal in the final seconds of that game. But with this being a rivalry game, they have a comeback win like that, and going into a rivalry game, I do feel like it brews a lot of confidence for Pittsburgh in this game. Also, Pittsburgh running back Desmond Reed has 293 rushing yards on the year, which is fifth in the FBS at this point in time. And I'm going to pick Pittsburgh to win this game, even though a lot of the times when we see teams, they play an emotional game, they have an emotional win or an emotional defeat. You have to question, how do you think they're going to respond? How do you feel they're going to respond? But with them going into the rivalry known as the Backyard Brawl, I just feel like they have that confidence being able to rally from a 27-6 deficit last week. And I feel like Pittsburgh wins, and I wouldn't be surprised if this was a lower scoring game as well. But I'm going to go with the Panthers in a very close one in the Backyard Brawl. Texas A&M and Florida, two teams that lost in week 1, but in week 2 they were gifted essentially scrimmages. A&M against McNeese State and Florida against Samford. For the Aggies, starting center Mark Nabo Jr. was announced out for the season last week with an ACL injury he sustained in the Notre Dame game. And running back Reuben Owens was announced out for the season a couple weeks before the season started, and he was due for a big year for A&M. For Florida, who will be the starting quarterback in this game? Will it be DJ Lagway, who did really well against Samford, but again, Samford was basically a scrimmage game for Florida, even though a few years back, Samford, they put up a lot of points against Florida? Or will it be Graham Mertz, a quarterback that I have said before that he's had some positive and negative moments, but unfortunately for Graham Mertz, a lot of those moments have been negative moments. And today, Billy Napier made a statement saying they plan on using both quarterbacks throughout the remainder of the season, which I don't know if Billy Napier really means that, or is he just trying to play mind games with Mike Elko and the Aggies by not saying who's going to start at quarterback for this game on Saturday? Maybe that's what it is. I don't know if Florida fans are wanting to have Florida part ways with Billy Napier as soon as possible, or if they're just hoping that the starting quarterback is DJ Lagway because he has a lot of potential. He's been receiving a lot of hype. But not only that, question being the X factor for determining who wins this matchup, who's going to stop the run better in this game? Because both teams in week 1, they had a difficult time stopping the run. And if I was Billy Napier, knowing that everything's on the line for me, I'm starting DJ Lagway at quarterback on Saturday. Because A&M, they had a difficult time with Riley Leonard in week 1, and that just adds another element to your game if you have a mobile quarterback as your starter. So I'm going to leave my pick at this. Unfortunately, every time I seem to support either of these teams for a prediction, they really fall apart, it feels like. So I feel like no matter who I pick here, they're going to lose. So I'll leave it as, if Graham Mertz starts, I think Texas A&M wins. But if DJ Lagway starts, then I think Florida wins. Because I just do think that Florida has a much stronger chance of winning this game if DJ Lagway is the starting quarterback for the Gators. Boston College and Missouri, a top 25 matchup that not many people thought would be a top 25 matchup going into the season. For both these teams, it is the biggest test for them yet this season, especially for Missouri. As Boston College, they do have experience this season going on the road in a big time game. And we saw Boston College pull off the upset against Florida State on Labor Day night. Missouri, they have not allowed a point yet this season, but you have to think about the opponents that Missouri has played this season. I will be surprised if Missouri has another shutout this week, as I just think that Thomas Castellanos and this Boston College team, I just feel like they are too talented of a program to be shut out in this game, even though Missouri is in the mighty SEC conference. And Missouri has a dynamic duo of Brady Cook and Luther Burden III. And Missouri, they're coming off of winning in the New Year's Six last season, having that momentum going into 2024. And I can't remember the top of my head right now what the spread for this game is, but I do think, just like when Boston College was an overwhelming underdog against Florida State, that there was value in taking Boston College with the points. And I do think that is the same case here for this game. Whatever the point spread is in this game, I think there is value in taking Boston College in the points. As I did mention before, that having a mobile quarterback like Thomas Castellanos, it's a big element to your offense because he has the ability to extend plays and to scramble and make things happen. I do think Missouri wins this game, but I'm not going to be shocked if Boston College pulls off another top 10 upset on the road, as Boston College, they are a program that I feel like is on the rise, especially if Bill O'Brien stays around within the program for years to come. But I do think Missouri wins. I just think that Boston College does enough to cover in this game, despite Missouri on paper being a significantly better team considering they're in the SEC. But Boston College, don't underestimate them. I would not be surprised if an upset took place, as college football is nothing without its upsets. Closing things out with LSU and South Carolina. This is the college game day game of the week, and I am looking forward to this one. For South Carolina, quarterback Lenore Sellers, he did go to the locker room towards the end of the first quarter in last week's game against Kentucky, but he did return to the game as he was dealing with a right leg injury. That is something to keep note of going into this game on Saturday. I do look forward to seeing how Lenore Sellers does against an LSU defense that I personally still have concerns about. I had expectations that LSU's defense was going to be much improved, and they wouldn't have to score in the high 30s or the 40s to win games. Their defense, it did look improved in the USC game week 1, but in week 2, they did get a 41-21 win over Nicholls, which I suppose that is a respectable win considering how they lost in week 1, where it's a game they could have won, but penalties defensively is what cost them in that game. But it was 23-21 in the third quarter. They were letting Nicholls stick around in that game. And they are now going on the road against a South Carolina team who is no stranger to pulling off upsets, especially in recent seasons. South Carolina, on the other hand, in week 1, it was an abysmal performance offensively against Old Dominion, as They just survived against Old Dominion, but as they say, survive and advance. In week 2, a dominant win over Kentucky on the road. And South Carolina defensively, they just had their way with Kentucky, especially the defensive line having their way with Kentucky's offensive line in that one. But they're going up against a much better offensive line in LSU this week. And based off recent history, I would not be surprised if South Carolina, if they once again pulled off another upset in the Shane Beamer era. Despite my concerns with LSU defensively, with this being a very hostile environment for LSU, is South Carolina, in my opinion, I think they are one of the most underappreciated fan bases in all of college football. I think LSU wins this game, but I think that South Carolina makes this a much closer ball game than what people are expecting. I'm going with the Tigers in this one, but not necessarily by that much. I think South Carolina keeps this to within 2 scores. And that will do it for my Week 3 college football predictions. If there is a game I did not predict this week that you would like my thoughts on, please leave it in the comment section and I will give you a response. As always, like, share, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, enjoy the games this Saturday. For those of you that don't tune in for the NFL predictions, for those of you that do, the NFL predictions will be out tomorrow afternoon. Have a good one.